Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at a global market that's really interesting, even if it's maybe not something you think about every day. Nitrile Butadiene rubber powder, or, NBR powder.
That's right. We've got a market report here that gives a pretty detailed picture of where NBR powder stands now and where it seems to be headed.
Yeah, and while you probably won't find NBR powder itself on a store shelf, it's actually a vital component in a whole lot of industrial stuff.
Absolutely. So this report we're looking at, it estimates the global market size for NBR powder in 2025 at USD 612.85 million. A pretty substantial figure.
Okay, yeah, over $500 million. That definitely gives you a sense of the scale here. And it sounds like this market isn't just sitting still, is it? The report suggests some pretty solid growth coming up.
That's exactly right. The forecast shows a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 6.4% between 2025 and 2033.
Right, 6.4%.
Yeah, so basically that means it's expected to grow, on average, by that much each year, compounding over that period. If these numbers hold, we're looking at the market hitting about USD 106.7 million by 2033.
Wow, okay, so crossing that billion-dollar threshold, that really highlights how important this stuff is becoming. What's actually, driving this growth? What are the key things pushing the NBR powder market forward?
Well, the report points specifically to rising demand for what's called cross-linked NBR powder. Two main areas. First, its use in modifying PVC, that common plastic. Adding NBR powder basically makes PVC less brittle, more flexible, like adding rubberiness, if you will. And second, it's seeing a lot more use across different applications within the automotive industry.
Right, automotive keeps coming up. So look, our goal here isn't just to throw a bunch of numbers at you. With this deep dive, we want to pull out the really critical stuff from the report. What's driving things, what the potential roadblocks might be, and how different parts of the world are playing in this market.
Exactly. Think of it as your quick guide to understanding a material that's, frankly, probably in more things around you than you realize.
Okay, so let's start with that big global picture, then maybe zoom into the regions.
That's good. We mentioned the USD 612.85 million for 2025. Now, geographically speaking,
Where's the action?
right. So North America actually held the largest share in 2025. We're talking over 37% of global revenue,
Okay, 37%.
which translates to about USD 116.44 million. Now, the projected growth is, well, a bit more moderate. A CAGR of 4.0% expected between 2025 and 2033.
So reaching about USD 159.1 million then. Still growing, but maybe not the fastest.
Exactly. And within North America, the U.S. is the biggest piece, of course.
Yeah.
But USD 91.87 million in 2025, growing around 3.8%.
Okay.
Then you have Canada at nearly 14 million, growing a bit faster at 4.8%, and Mexico around 10.6 million, also growing nicely at 4.5%.
And what's the main story in the US driving that?
It really comes down to that strong automotive industry and the constant need for parts that can handle oil and chemicals without degrading. That oil resistance is key.
Right. Makes perfect sense for cars. Okay, now, what about across the pond in Europe? You said they were also a big chunk of the market.
They were indeed over 28% of global revenue in 2025, which puts them at USD 134.83 million. Their growth is forecast a little higher than North America's at a 4.8% CAGR,
Okay.
bringing them to potentially USD 196.3 million by 2033. Within Europe, you've got the UK at about 22.6 million, growing at 5.6%, Germany slightly larger at 26.7 million, growing at 5.0%, and France at around 12.4 million, growing at 4.0%.
So similar drivers to North America, automotive again.
Automotive is definitely big there too, yeah. But in Europe, there's also this really strong push for materials that are both strong and lightweight for vehicles.
Ah, interesting.
And NBR powder fits into that picture, helping create durable components without adding excessive weight.
Okay, so North America and Europe are like the established heavyweights. But you hinted earlier that another region might be where the really exciting growth is happening.
Oh, absolutely. Asia Pacific or APAC.
Hmm.
Now, they held around 24% of the revenue
Yeah.
in 2025, but their market size was actually the biggest globally to start with, about USD 300.3 million.
Wait, bigger than in North America's share value, even with a smaller percentage? How does that work? Oh, wait, the percentages must be slightly off in my head, or maybe it's rounding. Okay, so largest dollar value in 2025. Got it.
Right, exactly. Largest slice in dollar terms. But here's the kicker. Their projected CAGR is 7.8% through 2033.
7.8%. That's quite a clip.
It really is. That would take them to almost USD 549 million by 2033. So they're already leading in size and they're growing the fastest. It really feels like APAC is becoming the central hub for NBR powder demand.
That's a huge shift. Where specifically in APAC is this growth concentrated?
China's a massive piece, obviously. USD 126 million in 2025, growing at 7.3%. Japan's also significant, around 41 million, growing at 6.3%. And then there's India, check this out, starting from about 30 million in 2025, but projected to grow at 9.7%.
Wow, nearly 10% CAGR for India. That's huge. What's fueling that across APAC?
It's a mix of things. You've got rapid industrialization happening, rising demand for consumer electronics, which use these kinds of materials, and especially relevant for India, the big push towards electric vehicles. EVs need really specific, durable, resistant components.
Yeah, that all tracks. Industrial growth, new tech adoption, classic drivers for materials markets. Okay, what about the other regions? South America?
South America accounts for a bit over 3.8% of the market, so around USD 23.3 million in 2025. They're projected to grow at a healthy 6.7% CAGR, reaching about 39.3 million.
Any standouts there?
Brazil is key, almost $10 million, growing at 7.3%. Argentina is smaller, around 3.9 million, but growing even faster at 7.6%. Again, think automotive needs in Brazil, oil resistance, and general industrialization in Argentina.
Gotcha. And the Middle East? Similar size?
Roughly, yeah. Around 4.0% share in 2025, so USD 24.5 million. Their projected growth is strong too, 6.9% CAGR, heading towards almost USD 42 million.
And the drivers there?
Saudi Arabia and the UAE are the main players. Think big construction projects, infrastructure development, even smart city initiatives. They need durable materials for those long-term builds. NBR powder fits in there.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, Africa. You mentioned it was the smallest market.
Yes, the smallest share, around 2.2% in 2025, which is about USD 13.5 million. Still, it's expected to grow at 6.1% CAGR, reaching close to USD 22 million.
Where's the activity concentrated in Africa?
South Africa is the largest market there, about 4.75 million, growing at 7.0%. Nigeria is smaller, just over a million, growing at 6.3%. In Nigeria, it's about needing affordable, durable materials for construction and cars. In South Africa, there's also some interesting use emerging in renewable energy applications.
Fascinating. So really a global market, but with APAC clearly pulling ahead in terms of growth momentum. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The report breaks down the market in other ways too, right? Like by particle size. Why does that matter?
Yeah, particle size is actually pretty important. It affects how the powder processes and performs. The report suggests the 0.15 to 0.30 millimeter range is likely dominant right now.
Why that range specifically?
It seems to hit a sweet spot, good balance between ease of processing and the performance it gives, makes it versatile for automotive stuff, gaskets, hoses, seals, and also for construction materials like sealants and adhesives.
A good all-rounder size.
Yeah.
But is there a faster growing segment in particle size?
Yes, apparently the 0.30 to 0.70 millimeter segment is projected to grow fastest. These larger particles often work better in more demanding industrial uses. They might offer better dispersion or mechanical strength.
And why the faster growth there?
A lot of it ties back to that shift towards electric vehicles again. EVs often need components that are even more robust and resistant, and this larger particle size might be better suited for those tougher requirements.
Interesting how granular it gets. Okay,
Yeah.
what about different grades of NBR powder? The report mentions cross-linked and linear.
Right. So cross-linked NBR powder currently holds the biggest market share. Think of its structure like a, strong net, very interconnected.
Okay.
This gives it really good mechanical properties, elasticity, durability, chemical resistance. That's why it's so common in those demanding automotive parts like seals and gaskets, and also in construction for heavy-duty adhesives and sealants.
And the other grade, linear, is it just less common?
It holds a smaller share currently, but it's actually expanding its share pretty quickly. The main advantage seems to be that linear NBR powder is often easier to process and mix with other materials.
Ah, so maybe better for certain manufacturing processes.
Exactly. And again, the automotive industry's need for components that are both flexible and resistant, especially with new vehicle designs, is boosting demand for this linear grade too. It offers maybe better compatibility in some specific formulas.
Got it. So we've got particle size, grade. Now let's take applications. Where is most of this NBR powder actually going?
The biggest single application right now is in PVC modification, like we touched on earlier. Adding NBR powder makes PVC tougher, more flexible, more impact resistant.
And where does that modified PVC end up?
All sorts of places. Construction uses it for things like pipes and fittings. The automotive industry uses it for various interior and exterior parts. Given how much PVC is used everywhere, it makes sense this is a huge application.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the fastest growing application?
That would be in abrasion-resistant compounds,
Yeah,
basically materials designed to withstand a lot of wear and tear.
makes sense. Where are those most needed?
Again, automotive is a big one. Gaskets, hoses, seals that operate under tough conditions, but also construction for long-lasting adhesives, coatings, sealants. You see a theme here. Boosting durability is key.
Yeah,
NBR powder really helps with that.
definitely seeing that theme. Durability, resilience. Okay, and does the breakdown by end-use industry basically mirror these applications?
Pretty closely, yeah. No surprise, the automotive industry is the single largest end-use segment overall. That resistance to chemicals, oil, heat makes NBR powder essential for things like O-rings, gaskets, hoses, seals, all critical for keeping vehicles running reliably.
Right. And following the pattern, the fastest growing end-use sector must be.
Construction, yeah, the fastest growing end-use segment. With all the urbanization and infrastructure building going on, especially in those growing economies we talked about, the demand for NBR powder and things like adhesives, sealants, and coatings is really taking off.
Well,
It adds that flexibility, wear resistance, chemical resistance needed for projects meant to last.
okay, so we've mapped out the market pretty well: size, growth, regions, segments. Let's just quickly summarize the key drivers again. What are the main forces propelling this market forward, according to the report?
Sure. So number one is that increasing demand for the cross-linked NBR powder, especially for modifying PVC and for all those automotive uses.
Right.
Then there's just the general widespread demand from the auto sector itself for brake parts, clutch facings, things like that. Tied to that is the overall growth in car manufacturing worldwide, particularly in emerging economies.
Got it.
And finally, there's that growing use in construction, the recognition that NBR powder helps make building materials like sealants and adhesives much more durable.
So strong demand from key sectors sounds pretty positive, but are there any potential headwinds? Anything that could slow things down?
The report does mention a couple of potential restraints, yeah. One is simply the existence of alternative materials,
Yeah.
other things that could potentially be used instead of NBR powder in some cases.
Competition from other materials, sure.
Yeah. And the second is the classic issue of raw material prices. If the cost of the ingredients needed to make NBR powder fluctuates a lot, that could affect its price and maybe how readily it's adopted.
Standard market risks, basically. Okay, one last area the report touches on is the competitive landscape. Who are the main companies playing in this space?
It's described as highly competitive, as you might expect. There's a mix of big global players and more regional specialists. The report names quite a few. Let's see. Huangshan Hualan Technology, JSR Corporation, LG Chem, Nitroflex, OMAM Novi Eye Solutions, Saudi Aramco, Cyber, Sinopec, Lanxess, Taprath Polymers, and Xeon Chemicals.
Quite a list. Any interesting tidbits there?
Well, it does mention that Xeon announced plans back in July 2023 to actually increase their production capacity for hydrogenated nitrile rubber, a related material, in the U.S. And it also notes they're working on bio-based alternatives.
Ah, bio-based alternatives. That's definitely something to watch. Okay, well, this has been really illuminating, a deep dive into a material that maybe flies under the radar, but is clearly quite significant. Thanks for breaking it all down.
My pleasure. It
Yeah.
really is a fascinating market. So just to recap quickly,
Mhm.
we're looking at a global NBR powder market worth over $600 million in 2025, set to grow pretty strongly, likely crossing that billion-dollar mark by 2033.
Right.
Growth driven heavily by automotive and construction, with Asia-Pacific really leading the charge in terms of momentum. And understanding those different segments, particle size, grade, application, and use is key to grasping where things are headed.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, thinking about all this data, the growth, the regional shifts, the key applications, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener. That point about Xeon exploring bio-based alternatives, how might the rise of potentially more sustainable options like that eventually change the game for the traditional petroleum-based NBR powder market we've just discussed? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.